We have almost everybody here. Give maybe one more minute. See, give people some time to log in. Okay. Well, why don't we start and kick off? It is 10:01 on the dot. My name is Courtney Pesh, and I am a regional planner here at SANDAG. I assist Kim Smith with the management and monitoring of the environmental mitigation program. And I want to thank you all for attending today's pre-proposal workshop for the EMP Land Management Grants 10 cycle of funding. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the SANDAG website. We ask all attendees that you have your microphones muted and hold your questions until the end of the presentation. Or if you have any burning questions, please place them into the Zoom chat, and we will, SANDAG staff will address any questions during the Q&A portion. Next slide, please. So on the screen above you is today's agenda. At the end of the presentation, we'll leave about 35 minutes for open discussion. And again, please have your microphones muted until the end of the presentation or place any questions into the chat. Next slide, please. So I'd like to back up and give you all some background information on the EMP Land Management Grant Program and its funding. The EMP is implemented through a memorandum of agreement that was signed by the state and federal agencies in 2008 and was most recently renewed on February 22nd of 2019. The MOA allocates $4 million per year for 10 years for regional land management and biological monitoring. Per the MOA, annual allocations for each fiscal year totaling of $4 million are reviewed and approved by the SANDAG Board of Directors. The work is then implemented through consultant contracts and the Land Management Grant Program. The purpose of the Land Management Grant Program is to assist regional land managers with the protection of threatened, rare, and endangered species and enhance their habitats to avoid future listing of endangered species while promoting regional habitat conservation planning. The SANDAG Board of Directors allocated $2.4 million for the 10 cycle of grants and approved the call for projects this past October. Next slide, please. Now, how is that $2.4 million split between the two grant funding categories? The EMP Working Group Ad Hoc Committee formed and determined that for the land management grants to be most effective at achieving regional conservation goals, $800,000 should be allocated to fill existing budget gaps to assist regional land managers with short-term stewardship activities, while $1.6 million should be allocated for longer-term, larger-scale habitat restoration and enhancement projects. Projects in the threat reduction stewardship category, located on the left side of your screen, are short-term projects in need of one-time funding necessary to fill existing budget gaps for specific tasks. Projects should be completed within 18 months and can be awarded a maximum of $80,000 each. Projects in the species and habitat recovery category on the right side of your screen are longer-term projects that focus on habitat restoration and enhancement with an emphasis on management strategic plan priority species and their habitats. Projects can be awarded a maximum of $1.6 million and should be completed within 3 to 5 years. I want to highlight that there is no limit to the number of applications an organization can submit, and multiple applications per category are permitted. Next slide, please. So let's look a little bit more closely at the individual funding categories. On the slide above you is the threat reduction stewardship category. In this category, eligible activities include management stewardship actions that will help to reduce threats to management strategic plan priority species and their habitats on existing conserved lands. As noted here, the highest priority will be given to projects that will focus on SL or SLO species. If you are unfamiliar with this species classification, a definition is available at the bottom of page 4 and attachment 1 of the call for projects. Basically, SL species are those species whose persistence is at the highest risk of loss within the MSP area without immediate action. And SO species are those species whose persistence of one or more significant occurrences is at the highest risk of loss within the MSP area. On your screen, there are example activities for projects in the threat reduction stewardship category. These activities include control of invasive plant and animal species, erosion control, trail maintenance needed to protect MSP species, signage and directional fencing, encroachment, enforcement, linkage improvement, and access control. This is not an exhaustive list though. Any actions which would reduce a threat, be that from humans, plants, or animals, may be eligible for funding in this category. But remember that the funding cap for these projects is $80,000. These should be short-term, discrete projects that can be completed with one cycle of funding. If additional funding would be needed to complete work in this category, applicants need to indicate on the application how much funding would be needed and where it needs to come from. Next slide, please. Now let's discuss the species and habitat recovery category. In this category, eligible activities include habitat restoration and enhancement projects. As noted here, the highest priority will again be given to projects that will focus on SL or SO species. On the slide above you, there are example activities for the species and habitat recovery category. And these activities include habitat restoration, including control of invasive plant and animal species and/or planting and seeding of native vegetation. Minimization of wildfire ignition and fuel sources to reduce intensity of spread and increase viability of the MSP species. And management actions as identified through the MSP Roadmap management objectives to reduce impacts to SL or SO species. As I mentioned before, the amount of funding available for these projects is $1.6 million. That amount can be awarded to one project or split between multiple projects. So if you are applying for a large grant amount, you are encouraged to phase the project into specific discrete tasks in case only partial funding is awarded to your project. Next slide, please. Now that you know the eligible activities, what is the evaluation process? Once all applications have been received and are reviewed for eligibility, an evaluation committee made up of the EMP working group members will review the applications. Projects will then be evaluated using the evaluation criteria scoring sheet provided in attachment 1 and also on the screen above you. The evaluation criteria specific for each funding category is on page 7 of the overview and instructions section of the call for projects. For short-term projects, matching funds are not required, and projects will not be evaluated for whether or not they have matching funds. Scores are based on a total of 75 points. And as many of you have probably noticed, there is a new section called additional points are applicable. To better align with SANDAG's commitment to equity statement adopted by the SANDAG Board of Directors this past February, a new evaluation criterion was added to both categories for scoring. This can be found on page 7 of the call for projects as well. Projects will receive higher scores for fostering social equity or providing potential co-benefits to community-based organization network communities, also referred to as CBO network communities. Examples include, but are not limited to, restoring open space in a CBO network community, providing educational opportunities on environmental conservation in San Diego for CBO network communities, engaging the California Conservation Corps to conduct invasive species removal, and engaging a minority-owned organization to perform work on the project. In addition to the new evaluation criterion that was added to both grant categories, A minimum score of 40 points was established by the EMP working group as a requirement in order to be considered for grant funding. For long-term projects, matching funds are required, and projects will be evaluated on the amount of proposed matching funds. Scores are based on a total of 95 points, and as you can see, the social equity criterion was added to this evaluation score as well. More information on the social equity evaluation criterion can be found on pages 5 and 6 of the overview and instruction section of the call for projects. Next slide, please. I will now turn the presentation over to Jenny Russo to discuss the legal requirements for the 10th cycle of funding. Jenny?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see and notice all of you today. So apologize in advance. This stuff is really boring, but hang with me. I promise we'll make it through this. Go to the next slide, please. A couple things I want to cover. So Board Policy 35 contains use it or lose it provisions for grants. The intent of the policy is to hold grantees accountable to the project schedules they've proposed in their application in order to ensure fairness in the competitive process and to encourage grantees to get their projects implemented quickly so the public can benefit from the project as soon as possible. The policy requires all project schedules to meet the following milestones. An operations service contract must be awarded within 1 year of grant agreement execution, and operations must start within 1 year if no service contract is necessary, or within 6 months of when the operations contract is executed. Grantees that are unable to meet these milestones will be required to have their schedules approved by the Regional Planning Committee. Next slide, please. Losing my notes, sorry. Another requirement from Board Policy 35 is an applicant must submit a resolution from its governing body that 1, commits the organization to providing the amount of matching funds set forth in the application if awarded funding, and 2, authorizes the applicant staff to accept grant funding and execute a grant agreement with SANDAG if awarded funding. Resolutions must be submitted at least 2 weeks prior to the funding recommendations being presented to the RTC, which is tentatively set for July of 2022. SANDAG encourages applicants to use the template provided in the call for projects under Attachment 4, Exhibit G, to ensure your resolution will have the necessary components. Next slide, please. California law requires that all workers employed on public works projects must be paid prevailing wage. Following adoption of the selected projects by the Board of Directors, SANDAG staff will meet with each grant recipient to review the project scope of work and discuss prevailing wage requirements in more detail. This is to assist grantees in understanding the requirements so they can be successful. Generally, prevailing wage requirements include payment of prevailing wages, which means grantees have to disclose prevailing wage requirements when hiring contractors to perform project work to ensure that the higher wages are included in contract pricing. All wages are due and payable twice during each calendar month. Contractors must keep and submit certified payroll reports to the Department of Industrial Relations, or the DIR. And contractors must comply with apprenticeship standards. Next slide, please. State law requires that all contractors performing prevailing wage work must be registered with the DIR. This annual registration costs $400. For cities, your contractors will need to be licensed and registered. And for nonprofits, both the nonprofit and its contractors will need to be licensed and registered. Additionally, contractors are required to electronically submit certified payroll records to the Labor Commissioner's Electronic Certified Payroll, or ECPR, system on a monthly basis. Even if contractors enter or track their payroll information in another application, they must still upload to the DIR. To assist with this requirement, SANDAG utilizes a labor compliance monitoring system that enables certified payroll to be submitted electronically and then uploaded to the DIR website. More details will be provided at the Successful Applicant Workshop once grants awards are announced. Next slide, please. Nonprofit organizations are not exempt from prevailing wage requirements. Prevailing wage requirements apply when a nonprofit uses their own forces, unless one of the above circumstances applies. Any work that a nonprofit has performed by a contractor is subject to prevailing wage. SANDAG is required to enforce compliance with state law, which includes informing the DIR of all public works projects awarded, taking note of violations of the California Labor Code by monitoring grantees and their contractors, and reporting suspected violations to the DIR or conducting an independent investigation. SANDAG wants all grantees to be successful and compliant with state law. More detailed information will be provided to successful applicants at the grantee workshop following award of the selected projects by the Board of Directors. We strongly encourage you to review the sample grant agreement provided with the call for projects and to ask us any questions before submitting an application. Now I'll turn it back over to Courtney.
Thank you, Jenny. Now that we've heard all the thrilling legal matters, I will now be passing over the presentation to Dr. Chris Preston, who is from the San Diego Management and Monitoring Program. Chris? I think you're still muted, Chris.
You would think after almost 2 years, I'd have figured that out. Thank you, Courtney. It's good to have all of you at this workshop. I'm just going to go through some priorities that we've identified for grants. And before I start, I'd just like to say that we may not have all priorities up here. So if you have ideas that you don't see here or in the material that we'll be providing, please just come to me with any questions. Next slide, please. So everything that we do with the grant program and with our monitoring, regional monitoring and management activities is derived from our MSP Roadmap, or it's a regional San Diego management and monitoring strategic plan. And so you can go to our website, next please. And you can go to the portal, next. And you can get access to, next, our document. And in that document, there's a list of the species, the vegetation, and the threat communities. And you can also then go to our project pages here. This is for the EMP land management grant cycle. So there's a project page at that URL below. And that will get you into the call for projects, next. And it will also allow you to download our priorities and objectives for 2022 to 2026. So every 5 years, we update our objectives. Our last round of objectives were from 2017 to 2021, and they are on our website in the tracker, or in the portal in Tracker. Our new objectives are not in Tracker. So you would need to go, and I'll explain this next, and Emily will explain it in more detail. You'd need to go to our map viewer. However, many of the 2017 to 2021 objectives are still in force, or they were still applicable. And so you can go click on those and get the details. Next. So we have the 2017 to 2021 objectives plus new ones. Next. And again, as I mentioned, we haven't got the new ones into our tracker database, so we're providing a map viewer. Next. And we do have a list of grant priorities at that web page that I just took you to. And so this is the priorities. And so for each type of taxa, threats, and vegetation communities, we will list out what some of those priorities are. And you can see that we start with the rare plants here. And the highest priorities are those that are already included in our framework management plans for plants. And so there's 7 species that are in there that are included in this this list. Next. And then there are a number of other rare plant species. Again, we're focusing in on the SL, SO, and to a lesser extent, SS species, which are species that are not quite as threatened as the SL and SO. And so there's a list of these species that are priorities and the types of actions that would be considered priorities for management. Next. And then we have invertebrates. We have a number of butterflies and some fairy shrimp where there's habitat management, restoration that would be appropriate activities. And then we have vertebrates. And again, this is for management. Our monitoring is not really conducted under this grant program. So this is for management activities for species like arroyo toad, spadefoot, pond turtles, least tern, cactus wren, gnatcatcher, golden eagle, northern harrier, and willow flycatcher. Next. And tricolored blackbird, burrowing owl, snowy plover, mountain lion, bats, and Stevens kangaroo rat. And so each of those has objectives on some type of habitat management. And then for the vegetation communities, for this round of grants, vernal pools are identified as our highest priority. Now, you might consider doing other types of vegetation community management, for instance, when working with Western burrowing owl or California gnatcatcher. So those do include vegetation components. And then we have threats, things like reducing fire risk and fire ignition sources, fuel reduction, altered hydrology, implementing BMPs to restore hydrology, trying to mitigate the human use of preserves, control invasive plants and animals, and improve connectivity. So those are all types of priorities under this grant cycle. And I highly encourage you, if you have questions, to talk with me or Sarah McCutcheon, because we can give you ideas on what things might help to enhance your application. Next. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there's a map viewer with objectives. Next. And I'm going to walk you through an example of how we might use the website, and then Emily's going to walk you through how we would use the map viewer. So if you were to go to our website, you could go to the tracker and you could select a species. Next. And let's just use Otay tar plant as an example. Next. And it would come up with all of the objectives for 2021 through 2017 through 2021. And these are all carrying through into the future unless they've been completed. And so then you could next go down and look for management actions. And then next, you would see this particular objective, which is to begin implementing the management actions in the MSP rare and plant management plan. So next. So this is on our website. And next. You would go to the Otay tar plant section. Next. And you could look up your population if you're a landowner or land manager that has a population, and you could see what the threats are as of 2018. Now we have more recent data through 2020 that you could access. And in most cases, things like non-native plants and grasses and forbs, or you might have in some cases, other types of threats. And so this would all be defined. Next. And you could go to a table and look up what you might do to what the potential management actions are. And so this could guide you in the framework of your proposal. Next. And just to point out, we have a state of preserve report that's coming out early next year. And a lot of the grants will include new reporting requirements that are going to allow us to help track in future state of the preserve reports or on our metrics dashboard how we're doing in management. And so the information that you're going to be providing in the reports going forward is going to be very helpful in tracking the status of the regional preserve system. Next. So please feel free to contact myself or Sarah if you have questions about your project or how you might frame it to make it more competitive. It's really important to include the management objectives in your proposal so that the reviewers can see that you are following under the MSP roadmap. And now I'd like to introduce Emily to talk about the map viewer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so in addition to those tools, there's an online map viewer that can be used also to look for priorities. So go to the next slide, please. This is an interactive online map. This has species locations and all the prioritized objectives. For planning purposes and looking for potential collaboration with nearby landowners. Oh, it says my internet is unstable, so hopefully I don't get kicked off. So this map is missing a number of species on purpose. We're not going to display golden eagle nests. We don't have every single location for mountain lions. Dudleya species have had some issues with people harvesting, so we've sort of obscured their location by just putting the entire preserve or putting some sort of grid, like a larger area. And so that's why I say it's just for planning. If you know that there's another species that isn't showing on this map, it's absolutely still okay to apply for grant funding for that. This is not the end all of every species location. And if you are looking for those exact locations, just go ahead and email me and I can provide the data to you privately. It just can't be put on this public map. So keep that in mind as you're looking, because there might be some things that you think are missing, and you're probably right. So this is a good map to just kind of look around at our new objectives, get an idea for what has been prioritized on your particular preserve. And you can also make maps. The link for the map is there, and this PowerPoint will be provided. No, that's a crazy long link. There's also a PDF instruction sheet for the map viewer that will walk you through step by step how to go through this viewer. And there's a link to that on our website through our library. I'm just going to go quickly through some of the main functions of it right now, but there is sort of more you can do. So next slide. This is the general layout that it looks like. You can download the shape files from our website at the top. You can turn layers on and off. You can move layers around and change transparency and things like that. I'm going to go over in more detail the draw and the print function in a second. Down in the bottom left corner, you can change the base map. So you might want to put an aerial image, or they have multiple options in there to pick from. You can measure distances, you can search within the layers, and you can actually add your own shape files. So again, if you know that there's species there and you still want to use this map to create a map or to see how it overlays with our other layers, you can actually add your own data straight onto this map. Okay, next slide. The main information that you're going to get is by actually clicking right on the map. And so if you click on a point, you get a pop-up box, and this one is showing you something for threadleaf rhodea. The top part is giving you just the name and management category. The next one is a set of links. So that first link, goals, objectives, and actions, is going to take you to tracker that Chris just showed. The next one is going to give you a species profile, which is going to give you some background information about the species. And then the species summary page is a page on our website that really gives you sort of everything. It's like a one-stop shop for that species. It's going to give you all the documents that we have available, the projects that are associated that are already ongoing. All kinds of information can we get from that summary page. And then below that are the specific objectives for the 2022 to 2026. And so you can see it says implement routine management identified as part of the IMG monitoring, and the years that that's prioritized. So that falls within this range of this grant program. And so that would be a priority for this. I just want to point out quickly at the very top of that pop-up box, you see it says 1 of 9. If you click on something, you might click on multiple layers, because they're on top of each other. And so you need to use that little arrow. There's like a little caret arrow over to the right. And if you click that, it will cycle through a bunch of pop-ups. So keep that in mind, because I think it's not as intuitive. It gets forgotten about. There might be more species that are underneath it. There might be threats information. So you can click through and cycle through and see some more information. I just saw a question that, will this PowerPoint be posted? And yes, it will, right, Courtney? Yeah, we can put it, we'll put it on the SDMMP website, and it will be on the SANDAG website. Next slide. So just really quickly, 2 of the functions that might be useful for this. You probably will want to include a map with your proposal. If you don't have the ability to make a map, you can use this viewer to actually make a map. So the draw tool in the top right corner, you can open, you can put a point on a map, you can draw lines, you can draw polygons, you can change the color, make it transparent. So I just quickly drew a blob in the middle there that looks blue. You can include the area measurements, you can include the perimeter measurements. All of that will show up on the map. And then next slide. You can use the print function to actually create a PDF map. So when you click on the print, you have a couple different options for the layout. There's some advanced options, and when you hit print, that's fine. So you have these options here, you get this map at the end, and so you can actually see the legend shows up and a scale and your blob that you drew, and any measurements or any text that you put on it will actually show up here. So again, there's an instruction sheet available that will really walk you through. It also has instructions for adding a little inset map if you want to add a second map to it. And so there's a lot you can do with this. I think that's the last slide that I have, other than to just contact me or Annabelle with questions. If you have any issues with it or have any questions, or you would like to discuss any of the sensitive data that's not showing on this map, just go ahead and email me or Annabelle and we can get those to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily and Chris, for going over the MSP priorities and the map viewer. I would like to actually now turn it over to Ramona Rosas from SANDAG's communication department to talk about the 10th cycle of communications requirements. Ramona?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ramona Rosas. I am a public information officer at SANDAG. I often support the PIO team by handling public inquiries, providing support at media events, and helping manage our social media channels. The PIO team is often the first point of contact for the public. We are also responsible for generating organic press, which means sharing the agency's good news with members of the media. We do that through writing press releases and hosting events and press conferences. Now, SANDAG wants to inform the public of the wonderful environmental work that is performed through these grant projects and highlight you grantees. We do ask that you maintain regular communications with SANDAG and mention us at every milestone of your project so we can help bring attention to the great things you all are doing around the region. Next slide, please. As I previously mentioned, the PIO team is also responsible for managing our social media pages. SANDAG has social media presence on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We post updates about key project and program milestones, report, education about SANDAG, and information about our board actions. We also develop social media toolkits that we can share with you to best learn how to engage with us. Next slide, please. Oh, and sorry, you can actually find our social media handles here if you'd like to give us a follow. Next slide. We will require award grantees to submit high quality before and after photographs each quarter. If you take a look at the examples, we really want to show the region the great difference you all are making. I think just providing like really high quality before and after images would help us accomplish that. You could submit it as PNGs or JPEG files. Just note that these deliverables should be directly sent to the EMP team, and they will coordinate with PIO to find the best way to capitalize on this material. So you don't need to contact us directly, but we will definitely be here to help you guys. I encourage you all to give us a follow and share our posts whenever they are relevant to your work. If you have any questions, just let us know at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramona. So now I will discuss what our new requirements will be for reporting now for this cycle. Over the years, SANDAG has been moving towards a more data-driven, streamlined approach to our projects and programs. As such, we have created new standardized monitoring report templates for the 10th cycle of land management grants. The purpose is to collect information on an individual projects and the grant program as a whole for reporting to the SANDAG committees. SANDAG will then monitor grantees through invoices, progress reports, and a final report. Once awarded, grantees will be expected to submit quarterly progress reports and one final report. In addition to what Ramona was speaking earlier about, which was also to submit designated photo point locations that are high quality photographs. Both grant categories have similar requirements for submission, including quarterly invoicing and progress reports. Once projects have been completed from either grant category, a final report and a final invoice are required in order to receive reimbursement. In addition to the traditional requirements, per SANDAG's initiative to standardize project monitoring, a performance measures spreadsheet will be provided, and grantees from both grant categories are required to submit each quarter to receive payment. Specifically for the species and habitat recovery grant category, projects in that category will also need to submit an annual progress report as an additional requirement. The addition of the annual progress report will assist SANDAG staff with monitoring the performance of the project. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to kick it over to Sarah McCutcheon from SDMMP to talk about the new project portal requirements.
All right, thanks, Courtney. So as Courtney mentioned, we have some new requirements for those that receive funding in this cycle, and one of them is to create a project page on the SDMMP web portal. So here we have an example of a project page, and at the very start, once you know that you are selected, you can start your project page just with the title and a short description like the one you have here, as well as including this information about the different people involved with the project, and you may want to start uploading photos. Next slide, please. Oh, thanks. And then as the project goes along, as you are submitting those documents to Courtney, or if you have any press releases or maybe instruction manuals or pages, that anything that's created from the project that you'd like to upload, you can include that on your project page. So the, more information to come if you are selected for a grant, but we would, of course, be happy to go over this with you. I can give instructions on how to create a project page and how to maintain it. I think that's about it.
Thanks, Sarah. So now that we gave you all this information on how the grants funding breaks down, the legal requirements, the reporting requirements, and SDMMP's project pages, I want to now talk about what does this timeline look like. Next slide, please. So as many of you know, the 10th cycle of the call for projects was released on October 25th of this year. If you have any questions for the call, we ask that you please use BidNet to submit all your questions by January 17th. The call for projects application period then will close on January 31st of 2022. And the following March, the EMP Evaluation Committee will review all applications and rank priority projects. That following June, the EMP Working Group will then recommend the Evaluation Committee's list of projects to be awarded to be brought to the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, also known as ITOC. ITOC will then review and recommend the Evaluation Committee's list of projects to be awarded to be brought to the Policy Advisory Committees in July of 2022. Then in the following September, the Policy Advisory Committees will review and recommend the list of projects to be awarded to be brought to the SANDAG Board of Directors for approval. And then finally, we anticipate grant agreements to be executed by November of 2022. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to bring it back to Jenny, who's going to talk about how to register using our new software, BidNet.
Hello again, everybody. So About 2 months ago or so, we started using BidNet. It's a procurement tool that we use for our regular procurement and contracting activities. I know it's kind of tough to get used to something new, but this will really help you, and it helps us see and make sure that all of our information is flowing really smoothly. So on this slide, there's a link to the BidNet Direct grants webpage. There's a picture of it here on the right side of what it looks like. You'll see any of our active grant programs that are out are listed there. Right now we have 2. There'll be 2 more coming up here in the next couple of days. And one of the things that we're working on, we do have a set of registration slides. I believe those were sent out when the call for projects was emailed. But we're going to be posting those as well as some slides on how to navigate the BidNet site, where to go to ask questions and answers, and how to upload your application in the system. All of this information we're going to publish on the grants webpage, which is sandag.org/grants, and you'll see all of that posted at the bottom in the next couple of weeks or so. In the meantime, it's pretty intuitive system. Once you go and you log into the system, you can navigate around in there pretty easily. To ask a question, there's a section that says ask a question. You can post a question. We've had a couple of them already that we've released through the system, so it should be easy for all of you to use, but certainly if anybody has any trouble, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll help you guys along. So I'll give it back to Courtney.
Thank you, Jenny. And to speak to Jenny's point, we had sent out all of this BidNet information, and if you haven't received this information for whatever reason, please reach out to me and we can get that information back over to you. So next slide, please. And then, so if you have any questions on today, any of the presentations that we gave today, all of our SANDAG's contacts and speakers contact information is on the slide above you. And again, the PowerPoint will be posted to the website, SANDAG's website, along with the recording of today's meeting. Next slide, please. So we are now here for the Q&A session. We ask that attendees please raise your hands, and we will call upon you, and you should then be able to unmute your microphones and ask your questions. Also, feel free to turn on your cameras. We'd love to see your smiling faces. And any questions that were placed into the chat, we will address now as well. So I see one hand went up. Charlie De La Rosa, I believe you are now unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just have a quick question. Is there a penalty for multiple applications coming from a single organization? I think you may have mentioned something about this earlier, but I just wanted to confirm.
Yes. So your question was, can an organization can submit multiple applications?
Well, really, my question is, does that reduce the chance that any single one of those applications will be awarded?
No, that won't have. The amount of applications an organization submit won't impact or lessen their chances of being awarded.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I see there is a question placed into the chat. Pop it open. From Mike Hastings, you asked, do matching funds have to be allocated directly to the proposed project, or can funding from complementary projects count as match? For example, a proposed restoration enhancement project that would support an existing restoration project in an adjacent area through source control of invasive species that were previously presented at a restored site. Other complementary projects could be separate actions that would support the success of the proposed project, maintaining tidal connectivity in a coastal estuary to support proposed restoration enhancement of salt marsh habitat. So your question, Mike, is could matching funds from a similar or complementary projects, could that be considered as matching funds? I am going to ask Jenny to confirm what I'm about to say, but I believe that they can be considered towards matching funds. But Jenny, if you can correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Yeah, they can be. The main takeaway is it has to be related to this project scope. So if it's a different project in a different area that's not related to this, then it's not providing a benefit for this project. So as long as they're interrelated, then yes, they can.
And I see Kirsten Winter asked, how do you ensure that project proponents have obtained approval from the affected land manager? Kirsten, I'm just going to ask if you could explain a little bit more on that question. By project proponents, do you mean like access or permits to the property? If you're, yes. Sorry, I forgot I have to, are you unmuted?
Courtney, it's Kim.
Hi.
Maybe it has to do with if you are a project proponent, but you don't own the land.
So,
Right. So I'm with the Forest Service. And so, you know, we do have some projects that occur on national forest lands. And so, you know, it's important because we have our own projects and priorities as well. So, you know, a project proponent will need a permission from the forest to undertake whatever project it is on the forest. So I'm just wondering how that is coordinated or ensured by SANDAG.
Again, I'm probably going to kick it back over to Jenny and Kim to confirm me on this, but that is something that we have. Either having a right of entry or access to the property will be evaluated when projects are submitted in order to be scored. And if you guys can share more on that topic as well.
I mean, I would think that, Kirsten, if there's a proponent that's proposing a grant project on your lands, they would have to be consistent with the Forest Service's goals and objectives, and we would likely probably want to see that.
This is Chris. In the past, you've required, I believe, a written letter of permission from the landowner in order to review that project and recommend it. So then that was given at the time of the application was submitted. That was my understanding.
Yeah, and there's a question in the chat about it that's linking these together. So the application, you have to describe, if you're not the landowner, who the landowner is, and prove that you've got some sort of legal document that says you have access to that property. Sometimes it's a letter, sometimes it's contract, could be all sorts of forms, but just something from the landowner that says, yes, you know, you have access to this site, or there'll be an ability for you to get to it. That is part of the application that's required. And I think the other part of this question is, does it count towards a 12-page limit? I don't think it does, right, Courtney?
No, I don't believe so. And then Jenny, to confirm, they would be able to upload all those documents once they've registered in BidNet when they're applying.
Yes.
Okay, so once you have your letter, if you do not own the land, then you can upload all of that information into BidNet for review. Great questions, though. Is there any other questions for today? I don't see any more in the chat. Oh, Jesse. I believe I just gave you the ability to speak. I see that you're, okay.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I think I know the answer to this question, but I just want to double check. If we were awarded a project and it requires federal and state permits for take, like a 10A, 1A, or a research permit, it sounds, I mean, from what I read, we have time to get that permitting worked out, but it has to be worked out and we have to have the permits in hand before we start the project. Is that correct?
It is to my understanding that you would need all of those proponents before you can start the project.
Okay, and so if we don't have those permits now, but we know in speaking to the agencies that we would be given those permits, I mean, it's not going to count against us if we don't have them, right, when we apply, correct? Okay, thank you.
Perfect. And then Gina Krantz asked in the chat, can you clarify the 1.6 million available for species recovery grant? $1.6 million total available for each project, can propose up to $1.6 million. Yes, so Gina, so for the $1.6 million, it can be awarded depending on how the applications that are submitted and being reviewed. The evaluation committee can decide to award one project the total $1.6 million, or it can be split between multiple projects in that category. So if you are applying for that grant category, we advise to have not necessarily a plan B in mind, but to keep in mind that you might not be awarded that full funding if you applied for the 1.6. I hope that, does that clarify that up a little bit?
And just to keep in mind, I mean, our overall goal of the land management grant program is to try to award, you know, as many projects as we can to benefit all these species. But again, it really depends on what type of proposals we receive and how they align with the goals and objectives of the management strategic plan. So I really urge everybody to, you know, to reach out to SDMMP. They're there to help. So definitely.
Great, thank you, Kim and Gina. Is there any more hands raised? I don't see any more questions in the chat or hands raised, but I'll give it a little bit more time in case before we call it quits for today. I don't see any more questions, so as stated in the beginning, I wanted to reiterate now that we do have a question by Aiden. What types of projects are most likely to get funding? So Chris can be more specific on answering this question, but projects that are most likely to get funding will be projects that prioritize the SO or SL species and or align with the MSP Roadmap's management objectives that Chris kind of ran through. Chris, I didn't know if you want to give a little bit more detail on that.
Yes, thank you, Courtney. So as you can see from what I went over, there's an awful lot of species and threats and vernal pools that are all there as high priorities. And so it will be up to the reviewers to look through that and to see the projects that are most justified in terms of needs. So if you are proposing to do a project for a particular species, it's up to you to develop a very coherent need for that proposed project. And so, for instance, if you're using rare plants, we have all that inspect and manage data that we've been collecting from our occurrences. And so that you can go to that and point out that this particular occurrence has a real problem with invasive species. And, you know, we really need to control it. The population's not doing well, and that would certainly make it a high priority. Or if you were going to do some kind of restoration for cactus wren, you would go to the objectives in the management and strategic plan, and you would either then follow the management plan that we have for South County or the management objectives we have for the San Pasqual Valley, and you would prioritize restoration near extant occurrences or connecting those occurrences, but you wouldn't be proposing to do something out on the coast where there are no cactus wrens in any close proximity, and so they would not be benefiting, given that this species does not disperse all that well. So you really have to look at the objectives and try to make a case for your particular project, and that's where Sarah and I can help you if, because you know, if you want to talk through it, and we could help with you to talk about that and figure that out.
Thank you, Chris. And then I see a question in the chat that I know that I'm going to throw over to Jenny is, how do you determine or define what is CBO network community? And Sarah asked that question. Jenny? Or maybe we lost Jenny?
No, I'm here. I'm clicking back and forth. I'm trying to find the specific page to give a reference to in the call for projects. So we do talk about the CBO communities. It's on page 5 of the call, and the section is called Social Equity Considerations. Basically, what we're looking for is, if those of you who are familiar with the CalEnviro screen tool that's online, any community that's listed in there that's most vulnerable, those are what we call CBO network community. So there is a definition of it in the call for projects that you're welcome to look at, but that's what we're looking for in terms of the definition. And then in terms of benefit to a CBO community, that's also talked about in there. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in that community as long as it's somehow touching that CBO community, or there's some kind of a benefit that's coming to them. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you, Jenny. Hope that
helps.
Yeah.
If not, feel free to raise a hand.
And then Jesse, I think your hand is raised. Perfect. And then I thought I saw Kirsten's hand raised. Nope, no hands raised. Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. So any more questions? And again, if you haven't already registered through BidNet, Jenny had provided that information on the slide before. So please check that out and get started to get registered in the system so you can get working on the application before the application period closes. I'll give another few more, a minute or so, people thinking about questions. Okay, if that's all for questions, I guess we'll wrap it up for today. And I want to again reiterate what Chris was saying. Please reach out to Chris and Sarah from SDMMP to talk about project proposals. And if you have any questions on registering or questions on the call, you can reach out to Jenny, Kim, myself. Our contact information will be provided into this PowerPoint that will be posted to the SANDAG website, and we'll send out an email with the link to everybody that was at the meeting today. And if you have any questions specifically about the call, you can place those into BidNet, and those questions can be addressed in there as well. Well, thank you all for attending today's pre-proposal workshop. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I hope to see all your amazing applications soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.